Good morning. It's Tracy Timm and George DiGianni.
Good morning.
We're going to take you behind the scenes of what it's like to film at. It's early. To film at 1310 The Ticket Sports Radio. So here we go.
I've been working for 2 hours already. It's early for you.
It's early for me.
So this is Tracy's nice little cup and all the teas and look at all the garbage you get to see. This is when you have a face for radio.
The real
you get to come in here and see the real deal. The headphones we never use. All the computers that we kind of use.
I'm
Tracy,
sure people use them more than I do.
Look at that cake. That was made specially for you.
All right. Well, here we go. Hope you're ready.
Station Fitness Show, 6:51 in the morning. My good friend Tracy Timm is next to me, but before I get going, I want to share a little bit of information about podcasts. I want you guys to go to iTunes, enter George DiGianni, DiGianni, subscribe, rate the show. It helps more people to learn about the show. Also, for all of these almost 20 years, I've talked about the importance of using professional-grade supplements, how you don't want to use anything that's retail or non-professional grade. Not only is it not beneficial for you, or it doesn't have the same amount of potency, if you will. Therefore, you're literally wasting money and you have to take more of it. And if you want professional grade supplements, I have probably the best prices anywhere for them. If you go to 21daybodymakeover.com, click on other supplements, you'll receive 20% off and free shipping. You don't even get that on Amazon with these supplements. So let's start the show. Here we go. 87% of employers are committed to workplace wellness, and 73% offer a wellness program. And then also a survey showed more than 60% of employers said workplace wellness reduces their organization's healthcare costs. Now, from an employer standpoint, they spend a lot of money, depending on the size of the organization and the role that someone's going to be filling. They spend a ton of money to train an employee, and if that employee leaves within a certain period of time, whether it's a week or even less than a year for certain positions, the employer has to pay to train somebody else again. So it's quite expensive to bring somebody on each time. Employers also find it hard to know what their employee is thinking, what they're feeling, if they're satisfied at work, if they're satisfied with the culture, the job, and so on. Are they feeling appreciated? All that, right? So next to me, my friend Tracy Timm, Yale graduate in behavioral psychology and a human capital advisor for Dallas's fastest growing companies. She's a coach for executives and young professionals and been an entrepreneur and business owner since 2014. Tracy.
Good morning.
Second time on the show. Loved having you on
it.
before. We did a great job last time because you and I kind of speak the same language, if you will, when it comes to what is your purpose? What are you doing on this planet?
Right.
What is your passion?
Hopefully we're not the only ones, right?
We are. That's the problem. And so what? But that also makes it a business, if you will, to share with people. Just make them stop for a moment and say, hold on. Are you moving in the direction that you want to go? Or are you saying you want to go this way, but you're doing a complete 80 walking the other way?
Exactly. Or taking no action at all. I had this exact conversation over lunch yesterday, and it was that people come up against these patterns over and over again in their lives, and you're the only constant in your life. That's, if you don't know any truth from this show and you get that one nugget, that would be great. So if you don't do anything to change those patterns, they're just going to keep happening. I completely agree.
So one of the things you said is that employees who score low on a life satisfaction survey or quiz stay home from work 1.25 more days per month than those with higher scores, and that adds up to about 15 days off per year. What is the mindset and the habit of the work to live versus the live to work employee that affects days off?
Wow, that's a great question. So what I've found in my work and in research is that we don't really understand how much our job satisfaction impacts the rest of our lives. Oftentimes, the miscommunication or the misunderstanding that I get from people is that they think, oh, well, a bigger paycheck is going to get me a better life. Well, if what you do all day long is completely outside of your, not comfort zone, but your behavioral drives, your motivating needs, it makes you turn inside out. It's something that you either hate or tolerate day in and day out. That impacts the energy that you have to give to the rest of your life.
So let's help me create a scenario.
Yes.
Somebody is employed in a new job, even a new career, and they're excited about it, and they're producing, and they're kicking butt, and then 90 days goes by.
Sure.
You can take a little bit from there, and then I'll interject. What happens at 90 days typically?
Gosh, it depends on how things are going. And I'll tell you this. So it's funny that you asked that because yesterday was my intern's 90th day on the job. And I fancy myself a good boss. And so I brought her cupcakes that had the number 90 on them, and she freaked out. But it's not just those little things that create employee engagement. It's not the pat on the back or the treats or the donuts in the morning. It's what kind of environment do you create for that person day in and day out? And are you cognizant of the fact that they're either similar to you or different from you? And are you giving them the things that they need to feel fulfilled day in and day out? So
I hear what you're saying. I don't want to interject for a moment.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, but you're speaking from a boss to an employee versus a manager to a group, an organization, employees. And it's much more difficult. You worked on Wall Street. You know this.
I did.
So you can identify with the culture is not an input, it's an output.
What do you mean by that?
So whatever you put into the culture, you may not get exactly what you want. The output is what the culture winds up being.
Sure.
So you can do that with one person much more easily than you could do it with a group of 10 or 15 or 100.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this. If you're directly managing more people than you can feed with 2 pizzas, you have too many people reporting to you. And that's a structural problem in an organization. And I borrowed that from a friend of mine, Jason Forrest in Fort Worth. So I don't want to steal somebody's quote without honoring them. But
Say
it's
it again,
true.
Because I love pizza.
Yeah, it's if you're directly managing more people than you can feed with 2 pizzas, you're directly managing too many people. That's too many people whose lives, whose emotions, whose motivations that you need to be conscious of to be a good manager. Because I'll tell you what, it is easy to suck as a manager. It's super because you don't have to do anything. You don't do anything. You just do what you want to do, and you go throughout your day, and you don't worry about how those people feel, or if they're fulfilled, or if they're going home and they're being good spouses and good parents and good citizens, right? You don't care. But when you're a good manager, you're cognizant of all of those things, and the purpose behind managing people is to get the best out of them. So what I don't understand is when managers come to me and say, I don't have the time to give them the pats on the back when I know that that's what motivates them, or I don't have the time to worry about what I delegate to each one of them based on what their strengths are. I'm like, well, that's your job. That's their job. And if they don't have the time to do it, that means they don't have the time to do their job.
So that's really frustrating. One of the things I'm giving a talk at Cox Business School here in October, and we talk about soft skills, right? Emotional intelligence, and you and I are talking about that right now. And excuse me, 90% of the way to make someone more motivated, effective, satisfied, and all of those other things we're speaking about comes from soft skills, yet we only use them 10% of the time. Okay, so here's the scenario. We went into the scenario.
Yes.
Somebody's excited about work. They hit the 90-day mark, then the excitement tends to wear off. Excuse me.
Sure.
They're part of the new culture. Do they fit in? Maybe they don't fit in. Are they ousted? Are they maybe they're a team player, maybe they're not a team player, maybe they're trying to be a team player, they're trying too hard, they're not trying hard enough, all of that.
Right.
And then what tends to happen is that tends to fall apart at some level. And in time, I don't care if it's another month, a year, or years later, productivity changes.
Yeah.
The person's body fat, their health in general changes.
Right.
The way they treat themselves changes. The way they treat others, their significant other and their children, changes. And I think there's a huge disconnect between the correlation of your job satisfaction and the rest of your life.
100%. We don't appreciate that enough. And I can speak to it because I've lived both ends of the spectrum, and my pendulum swings really far, right? So in my Wall Street days, I was that person whose entire life was affected by my 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. job. And what I wanted to get to was just a baseline. I was so miserable that I thought, okay, if I ever find a job that I really like, or even just a job that I can get along with day to day, I'll just feel baseline. And then the rest of my life will make me feel better. But the reality is that the more engaged you are with work, it's a completely opposite end of the pendulum, meaning it doesn't just swing to the middle, it swings all the way up to the other side. So an engaging job will actually give you more energy and make you a better person in the rest of your life. It gives you more to go home with at the end of the day. It makes you wake up with a different mindset every day. And to a large extent, leadership creates that culture. They create that engagement culture.
So you're 29 years old.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
Hey, that's my 30th birthday was the best birthday I ever had.
It's coming up in October.
Because my 20s were behind me.
My
I hated
golden
my 20s.
birthday.
Oh, it's greatness. But you're 29, and you're saying all these great things.
Yeah.
And I'm complimenting you on these because I'm aware of them also being a business owner and so on. So why does someone listen to Tracy Timm about career choice, changes, satisfaction, and so on?
Yeah. Well, I would say first and foremost that I lived it, that I took a great leap and a huge chance to find something that I love. And let me tell you this, I wouldn't necessarily only listen to me. I would listen to statistics. And if you look in psychology, there are only two types of regrets. And there's a real study in psychology about this. They're called sins of omission and sins of commission. And sins of commission are regrets for things that you did wrong. So you did something bad, you feel guilty about it, and then you resolve it in some way. Either it didn't go well or it did, or you smoothed it over. Either way, there's a result. There's an end result to that conflict. Sins of omission are regrets for things you never did at all, right?
I would venture to guess, and I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
But I would venture to guess this kind of aligns with the scenario of you're on your deathbed. What do you regret that you've not done? And that being that the sins of omission being, I guess, weighing the scale down more than commission.
So here's how it works actually in your brain. The brain wants closed loops. You know this. You've
Right.
done a lot of brain study, right? It's anytime you have vagary or ambiguity in your life, the brain wants to close that loop. And so when you don't do something, the brain has an infinite number of possibilities of what could have happened. And that's why people are haunted their entire lives by the things they didn't do, not necessarily by the things they did do. That's why people constantly are going, I wish I had told her I loved her. Or I wish I had just quit that job. Or I wish I had tried that business idea. Or I wish I had just moved to that state I wanted to go to, right? Because your brain is searching for the closed end of the loop, and it's giving you all the possible things that could have happened that didn't, because you made that choice. So don't necessarily listen to me. Listen to science, right? Listen to the fact that your whole life, you're going to regret infinitely more the things that you didn't try than the things that you did. And when I learned that, I was immediately convinced that my entire life I was just going to try. I was just going to try, because the worst thing that could happen is that it didn't work out. And then I would probably regret having done it, but I would regret having done it less than I would regret having not done anything at all.
So coming up next, one of the things I want you to elaborate on with where you're going right now is you're 29. You have somebody who's listening to the show right now who's 39, 49, 59, 60, 70, whatever they are, right?
It's never too late, George.
But I want you to expand upon that, because when someone and again, I'll be talking about this when I'm speaking at SMU Cox Business School in October, when someone gets set, they went from being single to now being married. They went from being married to now having a family. They're having children. They went from having the $200,000 home to the $700,000 home, right? And now they realize they're not doing what they want to do. They're not fulfilling their purpose. They're miserable.
Yep.
Because I had somebody on the show last week who decided to make a change. He was an NFL sports agent, Scott Natty, and he decided he wanted to go teach to make, $25,000 a year, and his wife supported him with that.
Yep.
Good luck with that happening with most people. So how do we help those people who
Yep.
are living that life, that are already entrenched, if you will, at 40, 50, or 60, or even older, to make the change that we're discussing here today? I want you to consider that, and we'll talk more about that with Tracy Timm coming up next. You can also find Tracy. You can subscribe to her email list, which I encourage you to do. George DiGianni Train Station Fitness Show. Next to me is Tracy Timm, Timm. If you would like to be part of her email subscribers, she would love for you to subscribe to the email, because you put out a lot of great content for people to contemplate, not necessarily make a change, although we want people to change for their whatever their direction is in life, but to at least contemplate. So, and I know you want to promote the nth degree, which is I think we're going now, but I left you with the thought of people who are older, in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They already have a family and they have the toys. And maybe they recognize that their passion and purpose is not what it once was or whatever or it ever was, because they've been living by the implants of peers, colleagues, parents, of what they are, quote unquote, supposed to do in life, right? And so how do we help these people change? I don't want to say adopt, but change from their current lifestyle and happiness and satisfaction or lack thereof to move in the direction that would make them and their family and their friends all benefit as well?
Yeah. It's such a great question. And I'll say with a caveat to this, that is so hard that's the reason that I work with young professionals almost exclusively, because I see how many more choices you have when you're young and not married and don't even have a cat, when you're renting an apartment. And
why does it have to be a cat?
I love cats. I know. I think I just lost half the audience.
You just lost
but
half. You lost more than half.
No, dogs are great, but I use cats for comedic effect. So hopefully somebody driving somewhere was laughing. But no, it's you have such a breadth of choices when you're young, but it seems that my generation is really overwhelmed by thinking they have to get it right out of the gates, or that they only have one path, one right path, one passion that they have to find or figure out, and it's freaking them out. But the more people I talk to who are older than that keep telling me, as your life changes, your passion, your purpose, your values, whatever's the most important to you, that will change. And so along with it, your core values and your commitments are going to change. And so that's what I teach young professionals, is not necessarily just how to find a job that they love, but a life skill of how to iterate, how to adapt over time, of how to really take an inflection point in your life and innovate around it. Because at any given point in time, you might find yourself laid off, right? You didn't choose that. But now you have to figure out what to do. Or you might find yourself married and you chose that. And now you've got to figure out what's most important to you now. So with older professionals that I'll say I've worked with a handful of them, it's the biggest hurdle I have is them getting over being stuck in one identity, that this is all I've ever done. And if I do something different, my entire life is going to change.
I think, let me just to compliment that, I think the fear that comes into play there is who will, and I'll say the same thing now for somebody who's overweight, okay? Somebody who's very, very overweight or very unhealthy. Who will I be?
Yeah.
And this is really important. Who will I be if I lose 100 pounds? Who will I be if I don't have this job or this career anymore? And it's the fear of not knowing who you will be. It's the fear of not knowing what to expect, and that's the importance of creating a plan and having a direction in your life. If you don't have a plan and direction, what you want to do, what you will be when you will be different, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
Because of the fear of not knowing who you'll be and the fear of not leaving your identity.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's my first step in my nth degree process that I work my young professionals through, and I'm launching in December the nth degree academy online, is called Now. And I start with now because I want people to grow where they're planted, to feel like they have a foundation, to figure out where they are now and where they can go from there. But the first thing that we do in the now phase is a life audit. It's a life audit that provides a couple different key metrics for a person. And we're still in this scenario of a 40, maybe 50-year-old person who's like, I want to change. I want to do something different. Great. The first step is knowing you want to change and do something different, right? But then once you get your life audit in order, what you do is go through all of the 8 major components of your life, which would be your emotional life, your social life, your spiritual life, your physical life, your intellectual life, your professional life. And your professional life is only 1/8. If I have 8 things that I have people grade themselves on, it's only 1/8 of your life. So people think that changing their job or not being satisfied in their job is going to blow up their entire life. Well, in reality, it's one tiny portion of a huge life that you're living. Like, give yourself credit. You've got people around you, a support system. You might have saved up some money.
Some people need a new support system, and they don't know it, or they do, and they're afraid. And here's that fear again of changing the support system.
So here's the whole purpose. The second purpose of the life audit is to really understand, where am I right now? What do I have going for me? What can I use as a launch pad to get to the next step? And where am I dissatisfied with what's going on in my life, right? It's an honest appraisal of where you are right now. That's the life audit. That's the first step in the now phase, the first phase of the nth degree program. The very next step within the now phase is creating a list of core values. And that is literally the foundation for the rest of the course that I teach. Because if somebody knows and understands what they value the most, it will dictate easily the rest of their decisions, right? I call this the peanut butter problem, because I don't know if you guys have been in the grocery store recently and gone to the aisle of peanut butter, like let's say at Whole Foods. It's a whole aisle. It's an aisle of peanut butter, right? And you can look at it and be like, for an hour, because you're like, well, do I want the extra creamy or the crunchy or this or that or the natural or organic? And if you haven't thought about it ahead of time at all, you can stand there totally overwhelmed and totally paralyzed by the number of choices that you have. And that's what today's workforce looks like for a lot of young professionals. It's also what the world looks like to somebody who's transitioning at an older age, going, oh my God, there's this whole world that I haven't explored. What am I going to choose? Well, if you know your core values ahead of time, and then you create, most importantly, commitments out of those core values, commitments that prove that those values are important to you, then when it comes to decision-making time, it's like a funnel, right? You walk into the peanut butter aisle and immediately you know half of them are gone because I hate creamy peanut butter. And then this next fourth are gone because I will only eat all natural. And then I don't really like that oil stuff that sits on the top, so I'm only going to do the ones that are mixed really well, right? And then you're down to like 3 or 4 jars. That's exactly how it works in the working world. If you know your core values ahead of time and somebody comes to you with an opportunity, for me, for instance, this is a great example. I love what I do right now. And one of my core values is freedom. So one of my commitments is being locationally independent, location independent, meaning I don't have to necessarily be in one place to get my job done. Doesn't mean that I travel all the time. It just means that I don't want somebody telling me you have to be in an office at 8 a.m. and you can't leave until 6. That drives me nuts. That works for some people.
That's also another type of freedom. One freedom is having the freedom to go and come and go as you please, so not having somebody dictate to you, so
right.
You have that person. Then the other freedom is your literal freedom, literal sense of being able to get in your car and go somewhere else and still work from your cell phone. And I don't mean doing that in your
car,
but I mean at another location or your computer location. You could be on vacation and still work. So
exactly.
So those two freedoms.
So let me finish this example. Is that I value that so highly that let's say tomorrow Google calls me and I would love to work for Google. I would love the Google juice. I want all the free food. I want to live in the Bay Area. I think Mountain View is beautiful. Like, I just think that place is great. And you can say for different reasons, especially with recent media, that it's not so great. Whatever. But who cares? I'm a very smart woman. I think I could do well there. Anyway, political commentary aside, is that if Google called me tomorrow and said, we're going to pay you double what your business makes right now, and we're going to give you all these amazing benefits, and you get to live in the Bay Area, and we're going to bus you in every day, and blah, 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 but you have to be in the office from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., I can easily, without losing a wink of sleep, say no.
So even though you're aware of all of the freedom within the company about going and playing and taking naps and all that stuff, it's still not freedom to you.
I know myself well enough, and I've done the hard work ahead of time, which is what I teach my clients to do, right? Do the core values exercise and create those commitments so that, every time you come up against a decision, it could be a very long decision-making process for anything. Like, do I want a peanut butter sandwich today or do I want ham and cheese, right? Like, we put a lot of pressure on random, unfortunately meaningless decisions. But when it comes to your career, that can trip people up for years, right? I don't know if I want to leave. Will I find anything better? But if you do the hard work ahead of time, such that when an opportunity is presented to you, you know yourself so well that it's easy. I know myself well enough now to know that freedom component in my business is crucial. It's one of my top 3 core values. So that's not something that I'm willing to give up, because I know that even though all of those other great goodies are there, and even the paycheck is there, all the things that they'll flash at you that will make you think this is a much better opportunity for me, if you know yourself well enough, then you know that you're not going to be happy there. And at the end of the day, all of those other things aren't going to make up for your unhappiness or your disengagement, right? Because that's what's going to bleed over into the rest of your life. It's not your paycheck.
What's next? Nature?
Nature is next.
Yeah.
So once we get through the now phase, that sets a foundation for the rest of the course. There are 5 modules in the course that I work one-on-one clients through, and then again, I'm launching in December an online version of this. It'll be all video-based with worksheets. It's going to be amazing. The production value is phenomenal. I'm really excited. But the nature phase is next. So really what we do with now is create this launch pad, this platform to move forward. The next 2 phases are nature and nurture. Nature is what comes naturally to me. I'm not trying to confuse anybody with these titles, right? It's what comes naturally to me. And you get that through behavioral assessments. You get that through talking to friends and family. What do people come to you for? What do people ask you advice for? Like what comes naturally to you without really having to try that hard? Your nurture is the opposite side of that coin. It's what have you learned or mastered over time. And if you think about a triple Venn diagram of now, nature, and nurture, where those meet in the middle, that's your niche or your next step. That's your niche or your next step, because whatever your life circumstances are, right, whether they're mine, which are, renting and single and unencumbered and no pets and whatever, and I'm locationally independent, or they're, a 40-year-old who's got 2 kids and a mortgage and whatever, like you can't live outside of your circumstances. So take that into account. And then your nature and your nurture, where those come together with your current set of circumstances, your now, that's your next step. And it's super easy once people go through those 2 components, those 2 exercises, to figure out, oh, wow, this makes logical sense. This will work for me.
So before we finish the nth degree discussion, excuse me, well, not before, but we'll talk about that coming up next, because I know you have, how many more are left? You have network and navigate, right?
Just the 2, yeah.
So let's continue to talk about the George DiGianni Train Station Fitness Show. Speaking with Tracy Timm, her website, tracytimm.com. Subscribe to her email list. I highly recommend you do that. She also has her Nth Degree Academy online course that launches in December 11th. Do we want to hold you to that date?
December 11th. It's happening.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. And we're discussing making changes in your life. Now, you were on the show once before we discussed this, but now you've given some real tangible tools.
Yep.
One of the things I wanted to begin with before we finish your Nth degree, I know there are 2 more steps. Earlier, you talked about being laid off. Was that your fault? And you said, well, being laid off, that's not your fault, la, 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 la. And I want to be just a little incongruent.
Sure.
For some people, some, not all. And that's the people who have disconnected. Remember my 90-day example earlier, and all of a sudden they're disconnected. They don't want to be there, whatever it is. If you're disconnected at your job, you hate your job, you're always complaining about it, you really don't like it, you're literally through the quantum field attracting being fired, laid off, or quitting on your own.
Sure.
And William Bridges wrote a book called Transitions.
Ah, yes.
You know about it?
I haven't read it.
Yeah.
But I know about
so
it.
I told you about it a while ago.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And he talks about when you're in transition, you've not necessarily made a move. You're not necessarily divorced, or you're not necessarily married. You're not necessarily leaving your parents' home. You're not necessarily fired or quit your job. But mentally, you're in a transition. You've already made up your mind. All right, so I just sold my house.
Yeah.
Okay? This is the funniest thing. I have been in transition from the time we signed those papers to sell my home, and so ready to move that, Tracy, I literally have everything packed in my home. I have 1 fork. I have paper plates, and I don't move until the weekend.
Oh, wow.
I've been packed for a week, so 2 weeks ahead of time. I've been completely packed. I have nothing but shorts and workout clothes to wear. No business attire, nothing.
You're the accountant.
Right. I am the guy I've been in transition, and I'm making these moves. So now I've not moved in my new home yet,
right.
But all that transition. So I wanted to just kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So Transitions, wow. I mean, it's a huge thing.
It's a part about recognizing where you are. It's part of that assessment, I think, with your
yeah,
empathy. Yeah,
exactly. And I think you're absolutely right as far as if you're disengaged and you're thinking about leaving, or you're actively disengaged and you're being negative, but you're not making a choice to make a change.
It'll be made for you.
Exactly, which is I think what I said earlier was not that it's not your fault, but it maybe wasn't your choice. And at the end of the day, though, you do have a choice. You have a choice to leave. And by doing that, you take the reins back. You take the control of the situation back.
And part of that is your next end, networking.
Exactly.
Right? Don't you think? Networking for the new job or the new career, or just asking questions and making connections.
So I had a fascinating lunch with a woman yesterday, and we were talking about how the two of us networked our way into the jobs that we both have now. And she was fascinated by this because she's like, well, I just did what I thought was the right thing. Like, you talk to people and you figure out what they think you should do, and then you talk to the next one that they recommend, and then you talk to the next one, and they know somebody who knows somebody who's in this company that you want to work for or whatever. And she's like, that just came naturally to me. I work with so many young professionals who do not know, networking is not a 4-letter word. It is not going to the Chamber of Commerce and having 3 glasses of Chardonnay and like bumping into somebody and being awkward. Networking is a targeted practice to get to your next step. So once you've got your niche, your next step, which comes from your now, nature, and nurture, the networking phase is when you go external. It's when you basically take your pitch, or what she called your essence, because how could you not say what you want to do when you know what it is, right? How could you not share what that sounds like, what that looks like, with other people and get their opinion? Because at the end of the day, when we're in transition, or we feel like we're not enough, or we feel like our career isn't where we want it to be, or our friends are doing better than we are, the last thing we want to do is share that with other people. But it is the most important thing to do. It is the most important thing to do, because you are not going to solve this problem alone.
Wouldn't you say, though, because this is kind of a sticky point when it comes to networking, and we don't have a lot of time, but I want to just touch on it, that there are people who are old and crustedy in their career. They've been there forever. And if someone asks them, hey, these are my great ideas, and there's this younger person approaching them with that, they might steer them away because of their experience. And my concern for people who network is that they listen to the implants of others that may oppress their desire, their passion. And I think it's important to recognize who's already on the path that you want to go.
Yes.
That can maybe even mentor you.
Yes.
Right?
So
and don't listen to one person.
Yes.
Right? Not to the end of one.
Yes. So I teach, and again, it's not networking, it's leveraging your network to create advocates for you and for your career. So you start with the people you know, and you go to them with your essence, your niche, your thing. And again, this won't be, I want to be a blank. It'll be, these are my core values, and I know the kind of environment I want to work in, and here's what I want to do day to day, and I want that locational freedom, or whatever it is that you want. And you don't hold yourself back, because you don't want to influence that person who's then trying to help you. I just did a YouTube video, so I call my weekly newsletter Tuesday Timmbits, because my last name is Tim, and because of Tim Hortons Timbits. Are you familiar with these? They're
Not Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons is a Canadian, like, I don't know, Denny's-ish kind of thing, and but faster food than that, and they have donut holes called Timbits. And I met a kid from Canada. He's like, you should call your blog Timbits. And so I have ever since. And I just did a Timbit on this exact topic of how you pitch yourself to get your dream job. And it's giving them what they need to know and nothing more, and letting them run with it. And I hear what you're saying, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, which is, what if they sort of tell you, oh, that's not possible, or I don't know anybody that does that. Okay, fine. That network stops there. And you run away from it, right? Go to somebody else who understands what you're saying, who can connect you to somebody who has either done that or knows somebody who does that, or you can shadow, or you can have an informational interview with. Like, the whole idea behind this networking phase, or the network phase in general, is to create advocates for you, so that when you walk away, that person is going to talk about you to somebody else.
So it's not, I've said this a lot, and this coincides with the way I've packaged this saying, but a lot of people say it's who you know. and I call bullcrap. It's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Ah, yes.
And that aligns exactly with what you're saying,
Yes.
right? So just packaging, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
And who do they know?
Well, but my point is, if you're going about your life, living your passion, focus on your passion, and somebody's met you or they've learned about you, whatever, they're going to tell others about you.
Yes.
And you're not even aware of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It's all about creating advocates. And then once you've done that, the last stage is navigate. It's very simple. You continue to navigate down each of those paths, and you find easy, small ways to test big ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Easy, small ways to test big ideas. I do not want you quitting your job and taking another job and getting there for 2 years only to realize you didn't even like that field or that industry or that role, right? Small bets. There's a great book out there. The author's last name is Sims. It's called Little Bets. And it's really about designing products. But if you read it as though the product is your life, it's fascinating, because if you take these tiny bets along the way that iterate and help you figure out a big answer, then you've solved problems much faster and with a lot less collateral damage. So for me, for instance, a time that I did this in my life was when I quit my job on Wall Street and I went on Semester at Sea, which is an undergraduate study abroad program. And I did that with a very specific purpose. I was trying to test out 3 ideas about what I wanted to do next. The first was just to travel for an extended amount of time. The second was to go back to school and get some kind of advanced degree. And the third was to work in social enterprise. And instead of doing each one of those separately and each one of those for a long period of time, I did them all at once in one experience that only took 4 months. Right? And at the end of 4 months, I knew, okay, I'm done traveling. I couldn't have lasted any longer. And I definitely don't want to go back to school because I don't need to. And social enterprise isn't necessarily for me, but I think there's something to this entrepreneurship thing. Right? And in the span of 4 months, also while having an amazing life experience, I figured out what things weren't viable for me and what were. So I teach people how to do that in a very, dialed down way. Like, you don't need to take 4 or 6 months out of your life, but who can you shadow instead of taking a full-time job? Who can you have an informational interview with instead of an actual interview where you have, something on the line? How can you take very small calculated bets to figure out if you even like something? Because your scenario of this person who is, let's say, a sports agent, but all of a sudden wants to go be a teacher, well, maybe they just think the grass is greener, and if they spent a day in a high school, they would hate it. That might not be the person you were talking about, but that's a very easy scenario to get wrong, right? So instead of quitting your full-time job and telling your whole family you're going to transition and doing all that only to get this full-time job as a teacher, and on day one you want to hurt yourself, do something small ahead of time to test out that idea.
Right. How can you tip your toe in the water? Maybe you can go speak at the school
Exactly.
or something, right? Maybe you can be some substitute or something
Talk
like
to
that.
a friend Exactly.
So the build it and come mentality doesn't necessarily work for those whose beliefs, this is important that we emphasize that, whose beliefs are the same before the program or exercise facility was introduced as far as a wellness program is concerned. So how does an employer motivate employees to exercise and eat well and to do so with consistency if it's not part of their core values? Right? So that's another consideration. The build it and they'll come mentality of putting this wellness program together is only going to work for the people who care
about working out.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
So here is where, and this goes all the way back to what we were talking about at the beginning. What do you do for each specific employee to get the best out of them? Right. It's all about understanding their unique motivators. We all have different behavioral drives and motivating needs that are the core of our behaviors. If you don't know this about yourself, learn it now. All of your external behaviors come from motivating needs, which are things that you need to survive, to feel in control, to feel stable, to feel safe. Motivating needs come from deep and either intrinsic or learned behavioral drives. That's the only place they come from. This is Psychology 101, okay? So if you know and understand someone's behavioral drives, you know how to motivate them in a very unique way that is not carrot or stick. It's not, I'm going to pay you or you're going to get in trouble. It's, that makes this person feel safe, feel in control, feel like they're fulfilled, feel, right, in a much deeper, more human way. And where we've screwed up with companies is that we've dehumanized them, right? Is that my intern, sweetheart, I love her, gave me this printout during our 90-day performance review that was a whole write-up on what makes great bosses. And she's like, I read this and I thought of you because you do all these things. And every one of them, George, every one of them had a human component to it. Relate to their emotions, understand their work out or their life outside of work as opposed to just what they do day to day. A good manager and a good boss and a great organization understands that it has humans working for it, not machines. And that it needs to approach them in a holistic way, not just in a what can I get out of you for the dollars that I spend on you way. So if you want to get somebody into a program like that, you have to understand their unique motivators and realize that they may not be, oh, I just want to be in shape, but maybe they want to like be able to run around with their kids, right? Or maybe they want to be able to go on that hiking trip with their husband. And by getting more involved in the corporate wellness program or whatever they have to offer them, they can achieve those outside goals. Not necessarily, that's also in benefit of the company, right? Because they'll save money, but that also benefits their life overall.
Tracy, awesome. Thank you so much. Love having you here once again. We bounce off of each other really well because we're speaking the same language. And I mean that literally because a lot of people have trouble hearing that. They don't get it, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not authentic with themselves or with others, and this can be a difficult conversation to have. So Tracy Timm's website, tracytimm.com, TIMM.com. Make sure to go to iTunes and